Hey folks, so I wanted to do a video to talk a little bit about the rise of the middle of the pack of North America, because for so long, the only teams that are really doing anything relevant internationally that played in the North American scene was a team like SK, the current best team in the world, and then teams like Cloud9 and Liquid, who obviously have had some pretty cool international results here in the past few months, particularly Cloud9 most recently. But then after that, there was really not much to talk about, especially with kind of like the death of Immortals and then waiting for 100 Thieves to come around to see what that Brazilian team is going to do, because obviously they have competed within the NA region. But outside of that, there just really wasn't a whole lot to talk about. But now, particularly with the teams Renegades and Misfits, there has been this step up in the middle of the pack. And both of these teams also do feature players from North America. And we've just really seen recently these guys really kind of step up to the plate and deliver a little bit more than what had been happening in the past, which has made the competitiveness of the scene a little bit better, and it's made the scene a little bit more interesting to follow, I think. And so I really wanted to highlight these two particular teams and maybe talk about some other players or teams to maybe keep an eye on going forward, as it just seems like the middle of the pack is more competitive and is just stepping up a little bit more. So Renegades is the first team to talk about, as they were kind of the first ones to start doing it. And this really kind of happened, I think, a little bit at DreamHack Denver. I mean, they were able to make it out of groups there. And, of course, this was after, just to set the context, having a lot of struggles as a team. I mean, prior to DreamHack Denver, they really struggled in their debut at E-League Premier against teams that they would later be good against, maybe even get a win against, or at least be competitive against. They got kind of embarrassed against some of the elite teams at E-League Premier. Granted, they had just gotten NAF, so you got to, take that into account. And then prior to that, they struggled with roster stability. They were using, their coach a little bit. They had jaywalkings in and out. They had Nexa, and then that didn't really work out. So they had a lot of, roster instability. And they also had some really rough losses, right? Especially online. They didn't qualify for ESL New York, so they lost to Complexity 0-2, which is kind of a rough result for them. They had a rough outing, of course, at the PGL Krakow qualifier for that major. And then when you think about it, their only real success was winning the Asian Minor for PGL Krakow, and that was back in July. And then other than that, it was just lots of struggles throughout the early part of the year when you consider events like DreamHack Masters Vegas, as well as E-League Atlanta qualification, and just different events. So at DreamHack Denver, they finally did make it out of groups by beating out a team like CLG, and then they wound up playing against Big in the semis, which they were okay in that semifinal, but then they really kicked it up a notch when they played in the next Asian Minor, one for E-League Boston, where they just tore through this tournament. I mean, no issues in the group stages. They did drop a map to Tyloo, I think, in the upper bracket final, but other than that, they only dropped one map the entire tournament and wound up taking it, beating out teams like Tyloo and Flash, as well as Mongols and Kings from the Aussie scene as well. Then they go to the Star Ladder I-League Shanghai event, and they win this event. They beat out Havu, which is a team that was getting a little bit of hype out of Finland, and they beat Flash again after losing a series to Virtus Pro, who had just come off the back of winning, not winning, but having a win at Epicenter, in my opinion, by making it to the finals. And then, they got the 2-1 win over Hellraisers, but I think they were using a stand-in, because I don't think they had Woxic for that event. Zero was kind of a stand-in, but kind of not, because he had played with the team before. And then they did wind up beating VP in the final, so this was a pretty cool result. Then they come over to iBuyPower Masters. They topped their group, including beating C9 in a best of one, as well as Luminosity. They 2-0 Optic, and they have a competitive series against Cloud9 in the finals, and this is a team that was impressing from the NA scene, remember. I mean, they had a couple of top 4 finishes coming into this, particularly the E-League Premier top 4 finish, where they looked really good at that. So this was a pretty solid second place for Renegades to be competitive against Cloud9. They did lose the Mirage match in that series pretty big, but they lost only in overtime on Train, and again, they looked good throughout the rest of the tournament. I think you go to IEM Oakland, their most recent event, and while they did lose to Liquid in overtime with the stand-in on Cash, which is a little bit rough, they did wind up beating G2 on Cobble. They were very competitive against FaZe on Train. They beat out Optic again, and the only real big loss they had was the Gambit match on Inferno. So while they still went out in groups at IEM Oakland, it isn't as bad as it appears, and they had some pretty big results when you consider iBuyPower Masters, Shanghai, and the E-League Boston Minor. And so you really hope that this can carry over to the major qualification itself, or I guess not the major qualifier anymore. Now it's all the major, but to progress, to the deeper levels of the major system now, especially with all the struggles they've had. When you think about the recent results, they certainly have taken a step up, and it looks like they've really improved. And it's been interesting to follow. And some of the changes this team has really experienced is, for one, it feels like just the leadership of the team has developed more as Nifty's had more time to in-game lead this particular team, and as he's had more time to work with NAF since their E-League Premier debut, it just seems like he's getting a better grip on things. And the Quesada as a coach, certainly you have to think of, has helped to develop the leadership as well, helped them be a little bit more tactically diverse. And I think also alongside this, you have to also realize that Nifty has also become more consistent, having impact on the game with his gun. I mean, he had the really big Asian minor back in July where he looked really hot, but then he kind of cooled off. But the last few events where Renegades had success, part of that is the fact that Nifty has put up more numbers. And you could account that to just, maybe balancing in-game leadership and opping a little bit better, maybe not having to micromanage his players as much because they've had more time together, and the other players in the team maybe know the protocols and know what the expectations are for them. This frees up Nifty to be able to perform a little bit better as a fragger, or it could just be stepping up into better form due to his practice regimen as far as fragging goes. Whatever the case may be, Nifty's leadership has developed well, the strategy of the team has developed more over time, especially in recent times, and Nifty has become a more impactful player because of it. I mean, this is just a really important point to make. Obviously, NAF coming in as a star player for the team has certainly helped the production of fragging power on this team, so that has to be noted. And I've already done a whole video that you can check out. I'll put it in the description below, where I talked about NAF developing into a North American star, and him doing that has really propelled Renegades forward. Also, I will note that JKS seems to be returning to better form. He was always kind of seen as a rock of this team, a very stable player, very clutch player, more of a passive force on the team. Was one of the star players even for this brand at different points in time. But he had a rough early part of 2017, if we're honest. But he was really solid at the Asian Minor, at Star Ladder, at iBuyPower Masters, and at IM. When you compare to earlier events this year like DreamHack Denver or DreamHack Masters Malmo or the DreamHack Masters Vegas event. So his production has come up, and you could account that to becoming more comfortable as the teams become more stable, leadership changes, just him getting back into better form, developing more confidence. Whatever the case may be, he's also set this game. So you've basically had NAF come in as a star. He's also become more versatile as a player. He's been able to help the attacking force of this team not just have to be a late-round clutch player. And again, I go into more detail about NAF in the video I did about NAF, so I'll just let you check that out if you want to hear more about how NAF has impacted this team. Nifty has become a better player and has developed as a leader, and JKS has returned to form. So when you add all that up, certainly it has allowed them to produce some better results and be a more interesting team to follow. So now we'll go over to Misfits, who have also seen a huge rise in their performances. I mean, when you think about this team earlier this year, they had some really rough group stage exits at DreamHack Valencia and DreamHack Atlanta. They also didn't qualify for E-League Premier with an L to Rise Nation. They also didn't qualify for Epicenter with losses to Optic and Energy, and also didn't qualify for IM Oakland with a 0-2 loss to Energy as well. So having some struggles. Their only real success was DreamHack Tours in May. They actually played a really good tournament there with Amanek and Devaduvic playing on home soil. Had a pretty good showing there, and they did well online in EPL Season 6 to make it to the EPL Finals, but outside of that, they were certainly having their struggles. But then we saw them win online in October, the CyberPower PC Elite Series, where they were able to beat Renegades, Optic, and Luminosity to be able to get that online title, so a pretty good online showing for them. Then they're actually able to translate it offline just the next month here in November, when they were able to take second at the E-League Boston Americas Minor, where they were able to get revenge against Rise Nation, I guess you could say, who had knocked them out of the E-League Premier qualification. They were able to beat Luminosity as well. Then they went on to 2-1 Team Liquid in the early stages of the playoffs. Then they took care of business against CLG 2-1 to be able to guarantee themselves a spot in the major system. And then they wound up losing the Team Liquid in the grand final, but took a map off of them there as well. So When you look at it, it was like 3 maps to 3 maps exchanged between Liquid and Misfits at this tournament. And then, of course, this is when Liquid still had Stanislaw, and they were coming off the back of some really big results. So this was legit stuff. And then they go to iBuyPower Masters. They do go out in groups here, but they did only lose to Liquid in overtime, a very close game. They beat CLG, and then they lost 1 map to Optic Gaming. You know, it's all best of ones there. And then they go on to the EPL Season 6 finals here just recently. They beat out Energy, North, and NIP in the group stages with losses to Optic and SK. Then they 2-0 Hellraisers to move on to the semis, where they lose to the eventual champions and the best team in the world, SK. Granted, some pretty big losses where they weren't even competitive. But still, when you look at some of their more recent online tournament results, when you look at the, you know, America's Minor, and you look at the fact that they were able to make a pretty deep run at EPL Season 6 finals, this is certainly a step up from what they've been doing the bulk of the year outside of that one big result at DreamHack Tour in May. So this is definitely signs of improvement. Again, you have to take in the context that at EPL, they only did play like a couple of maps, Overpass and Cobblestone, really. That's what they used to get out of groups, and then they wound up getting blasted on those same 2 maps against SK in the semifinals. So there's certainly got to be a little bit of context there that maybe their map pool is a little bit shallow, especially when you consider that they had their struggles on cash at iBuyPower Masters. And again, every single series win they had at the America's Minor did rely on winning Cobblestone. In fact, they won Cobblestone every single playoff match they played at the America's Minor. And they also had shown some good Mirage, though. I will point that out. You know, they did beat Liquid and CLG on Mirage in the 2 best series they won to be able to qualify for the major system. So Mirage seems to be up there, Cobblestone seems to be up there, Overpass seems to be up there, but those 2 maps, Cobb and Overpass, have also kind of failed them in a big best of 3. So there needs to be some context there, but still certainly an improvement in play. And what's really changed for this team is it seems like Sean Gares has become more of a lurk and support type player. Even if his default position hasn't changed on T sides, he plays that position in a little bit more of a supportive fashion maybe he did before, and he has certainly had some role swaps on a couple of maps to open up his other players to be more active and for him to be more of, like I said, a support factor. This has allowed him to frag a little bit better, which certainly still does help, but that's really not the focal point. It's more about maybe getting other people more comfortable and just utilizing his players better. He accounts this to, in interviews I've seen, to just learning his players better from playing with them over time and learning how to use them better and what they're more comfortable with, and just having a lot of time to practice together, focus on certain maps. He got the boot camp in Europe in particular before the EPL finals, from what I understand, and this really helped him be able to get to play against European teams and grind through things and learn things, and so certainly all of that helps. Also have to take into account that Amanek and Devil Duvik have gotten to much better form, and some of this could be accounted for just maybe being more comfortable with the team with playing with them longer. Maybe the language barrier is starting to erode a bit because they've been speaking in English more. It could be because of some of the role swapping that Sean Gares has done. They've also swapped some stuff on some of their CT sides as far as what spot certain players are playing. Cobblestone is one particular map to talk about where they've swapped CT positions a couple of times, and it feels like maybe now they've gotten people in more comfortable roles on CT side, but also on T side attacking. So the fact that Amanek and Devil Duvik have gotten to better form is certainly helpful. Devil Duvik's improvement in form is a little bit more subtle, whereas Amanek was an absolute monster at the America's Minor. He's also really good at iBuyPower Masters, so his form has definitely stepped up, it seems like, the last few events, and Devil Duvik has gotten slightly better, and Sean Gares has gotten his fragging output has also gone up a little bit as well. I felt like Shazam and Sick have always been pretty good fraggers for this team, and they've kind of remained that way, while some of these other guys have stepped up. That's really helped the overall fragging power of the team. Again, I think it's just also maybe a little bit more about developing team play. They've always been a team that was pretty diverse tactically, and were able to play defaults, were able to throw in some cool executes, were able to have some good counter strats from scouting opponents, as Sean Gares has been famous for that. Sean Gares has also been innovative in certain ways, like that whole decoy grenade play on Mirage on the A-bomb site to bait out grenades, and then you throw your utility set. You saw this at the America's Minor. So coming up with little gimmicky stuff like that. But it just seems like, even though they've always been fairly innovative and execute-driven in particular, it just seems like their executes are a bit more crisp now. And it could be because Sean Gares is being more supportive, just more time dry running those things and drilling those executes. Whatever the case may be, they just seem to work better now as a unit. And the fact they've been able to maybe kind of focus on only a small grouping of maps at the tournaments they've played recently may have also have helped them. And it also could be their downfall, though, if they aren't able to, be able to expand that just a little bit. Though apparently from their practice, they're very comfortable on multiple maps. We maybe just haven't seen them play enough maps to really know how that's going to go. But just thought I would point that out. So here you have it. You have two teams kind of considered middle of the pack teams and competing in the North American region, stepping up their game and starting to do some stuff relevant in the international scene. It's not just your Cloud9, your Team Liquid, and your SK being able to put up big international results. Now, all of a sudden, teams like Misfits and Renegades are stepping up their game and becoming a little bit more relevant, a little bit more noticeable. Teams that make the scene a little bit more interesting, particularly within the North American region. Now, granted, they're still not hitting the same big results and on a consistent enough basis in comparison to a team like SK, who are the best team in the world and who are just doing it in and out all the time despite roster changes, and then Cloud9, who look a lot more promising lately, but they're still looking improved from where they were before, and I think it's worth noting that. Some other teams to maybe keep an eye on in the middle of the pack would be teams like Luminosity, who at least in their losses at the EPL finals did look a bit more competitive, but still really hard to know what they're really going to look like going forward. We'll have to see at ECS, perhaps, so they can have a big result there. Maybe you add LG to the argument of the middle of the pack rising within the North American region. And then Energy, yeah, they had some cool best of one results as well at EPL, but the roster instability has plagued them all year long, and there's just not a big enough sample size with this current 5 that they have to really know if they're going to be a part of this argument of the middle of pack rising in the North American region competition. But those are at least a couple of team names to maybe keep an eye on. And then you also have to wonder, there's some players out there who could maybe even help propel some of these middle of the pack North American teams. It seems like Liquid and Cloud9 are pretty well set as far as their lineups go, but maybe some of these teams out there could improve by picking up a player like Finesse or a Stanislaw or an Ethan or a Ricky or some of these other guys out there, and perhaps they could bolster their rosters a bit. Maybe some of the names I've already mentioned, or maybe some other teams out there I haven't mentioned could be a part of this movement if they're able to acquire that talent and it meshes well. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about the rising of the middle of the pack in North America, particularly focusing on Renegades and Misfits. If you guys enjoyed the content, please subscribe for more. Thanks so much.